Welcome back to Medieval Times, where today we were gone, not be finding out what it was like to be an elite member of the clergy, specifically a bishop in a great Gothic cathedral. God. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to see more content like this, please consider liking and subscribing so that we can make more history videos. Bells chime overhead as you, a humble monk, begin your morning prayers. Sunlight glints off the steel blade at your side, once it was tucked into a scabbard beneath your coarse brown robe. Now it rests upon your knee. And yes, a politician, a landowner, a royal advisor who controls enormous wealth and oversees dozens of towns, commands armies in the name of peace. In the bishop's palace, you host visiting nobles, arbitrate feuds, commission paintings, write letters to kings, never to a fellow bishop. You are not poor, nor humble. And yet every Sunday, you bow before the same altar as the peasants you rule. Raise the host with trembling hands, invoke the names of saints, recite ancient Latin. You have shed many of the trappings of your old life. And as a bishop, you had access to the finest wines, cheeses, and spices that Europe had to offer. You were also responsible for the spiritual well-being of your subjects, which meant that you had to spend a lot of time hearing confessions, administering last rites, and of course, preaching. After all, the church was the largest landowner in Europe, and it used its property for everything from farming to building cathedrals. That meant that the peasants had a lot of contact with the church, and they weren't always happy about it. Not exactly the sort of thing that made you popular with the ladies, but someone had to do it. So that meant the bishops had to walk a fine line between keeping the peasants happy and keeping them under control. If you were born a bastard, it was unlikely that you would ever hold any kind of power or influence. You had good days and bad days. You made decisions that were popular and unpopular. You experienced both great joy and great sorrow. You were making a difference in the world one sermon at a time. But through it all, you knew that you had something special, something that set you apart from the rest of humanity, the knowledge that you were a servant of God. You might be able to make something of yourself as a merchant or a craftsman, but you could never become a knight or a priest, or God forbid, a monarch. To be fair, most bishops didn't take the whole celibacy thing all that seriously. I mean, even though they weren't allowed to marry, they were known for keeping mistresses and fathering children. They were only human after all. And when the weather was nice, you could enjoy them out on your own private balcony, overlooking your domain. See, being a bishop during the High Middle Ages was a pretty cush gig. You had to deal with the occasional peasant revolt or power struggle with the local lord. As a bishop, you were expected to entertain a lot of guests. Both important people like visiting nobles and royals and lesser folk like your own priests and church officials. You also had to keep a store of food on hand in case you came under siege, which was always a risk when you were in charge of a large group of people. And since your meals were generally served to you on a platter, you didn't have to worry about getting your hands dirty. Some of them even became monks or nuns, following in their father's footsteps. But it wasn't always a happy ending for the children of bishops. Sometimes their fathers died before they were grown up, and their mothers couldn't provide for them. In those cases, the kids often had to fend for themselves on the streets, which wasn't easy in the Middle Ages. But for the most part, you were pretty much left to run your diocese as you saw fit. After all, you were supposed to be a man of the cloth, not a man of the feast. If you got too fat, well, people might start to think that you were on spending enough time in prayer and too much time at the table. And given the fact that you were usually pretty chummy with the king, that meant that you had a lot of power. Power that came with a lot of perks. Given away your worldly possessions, renounced carnal pleasures. You live a pure existence among these high-ceilinged stone halls. Your diocese brought in a lot of revenue from the tithes paid by your subjects. Plus, you probably had a few noble relatives who were happy to help out their favorite bishop. So if you needed to hire some extra servants or put a new roof on the cathedral, you could do it without worrying too much about where the money was going to come from. In winter, the air grows thick with incense to mask the stench of stale waste. In summer, chamber pots make your bed a minefield of human refuse. Disease stalks the sick room where lepers wait for death or God's mercy. Still, there is beauty here. High above the gargoyles and flying buttresses, sunlight paints the vaulted ceiling with gold. In the refectory, you break bread with your brethren. In the scriptorium, monks copy manuscripts by lamplight. At evening, you join the other monks in prayer, voices rising and falling as you intone psalms. Sleep comes easily in the small hours. Visions of angels, pleasant dreams of earthly delights. Yes, you remember those. Before your vows of chastity, you were young, very young. You chased girls, wrestled with boys, reveled in the warm hearth of family. Those days are gone. Now you serve God, renounce the flesh. You and your fellow monks live lives of quiet desperation, laboring in the fields, copying books, praying ceaselessly. Wake, work, eat, pray, work, eat, pray. The rhythm of the day set by the monastery bell. For centuries, such has been the lot of the Christian monk. The sun streaks through stained glass. Light spills onto the cold stone floor. No longer do you toil in obscurity as a nameless monk. You are now a bishop, perhaps in Reims or York or Toledo. You do not rise before dawn. Your attendants do that. Your chambers are warm. Tapestries line the walls. You dine on roasted fowl, spiced pears, honeyed cakes. You wear rings, furs, gowns of velvet. You are addressed as my lord. Outside, the cathedral rises like a mountain of light and stone. Trade your habit for luxurious robes, your staff for a crozier, your sandals for red leather slippers. Stained glass windows cast rainbows on marble. Choir boys chant beneath vaulted ceilings. Candles flicker atop silver altars. But let us change things up a bit. As a bishop, you are a spiritual guide, a teacher, a servant of God. Now, you might think that the life of a bishop was all holy water and good works, but that'd be a bit unrealistic, wouldn't it? For starters, you didn't have to worry about money. And then there was the food. Oh boy, was there a lot of it. Of course, all this food did come with a price, since one of the downsides of being a bishop was having to keep your eye on your waistline, and they often resented the power that the church had over their lives. That said, there was nothing wrong with enjoying the finer things in life, as long as you didn't overdo it. Of course, life as a bishop wasn't all fun and games. And then there were the peasants. They weren't exactly the easiest group of people to please. On the other hand, the peasants were also the backbone of the church. And without their support, the church wouldn't have been able to function. Well, they were usually sent to live with relatives or put into the care of servants. It wasn't easy, but it was definitely a challenge that kept life as a bishop interesting. So what happened to those kids? Still, it was better than the alternative. In the end, life as a bishop wasn't all that different from life as anyone else. It wasn't always easy being a bishop, but as you stood at the pulpit on Sunday mornings looking out over your flock, you knew that it was all worth it. And hey, maybe, just maybe, you were actually having a pretty decent time doing it. Thanks for watching.